Hello, everyone. This is Transmutation Podcast. Our focus is to bring you inspirational speakers from all walks of life that have transmuted challenges into success. We all have obstacles to overcome, and our guests will give you insights to provide the inner wisdom for your own transformation. Every one of us is capable of achieving greatness, but rarely unleash the passion necessary to propel us to the next level. Transmutation Podcast will take away the barriers to unlimited potential that exists within all of us. I'm Michael Jaco with Moe Bedard, your host for Transmutation Podcast. Joining us today on Transmutation Podcast is Dr. John McGrail, creator of the McGrail method of quantum synthesis, whose number one rule is, life is supposed to be fun. Dr. John McGrail is more than a clinical hypnotherapist. He is an established self-improvement expert and a sought-after spiritual teacher who has become one of our country's leading media experts and public speakers relating to personal growth and successful life transformation. His company, A Better You, Inc., serves a worldwide clientele, individuals of all ages and backgrounds, as well as select corporate clients. Services range from individual sessions to motivational presentations, training seminars, and workshops. Dr. McGrail earned a Bachelor of Science degree from Cornell University and received his certification in clinical hypnotherapy at the Hypnosis Motivational Institute, the nation's first federally accredited college of hypnotherapy. After graduating with honors, he went on to earn a PhD in clinical hypnotherapy from Breyer State University. In addition to hypnotherapy, Dr. McGrail is also certified in NLP, neuro-linguistic programming, timeline therapy, therapeutic imagery, and EFT. Dr. McGrail's writing and expertise has been and are frequently featured in numerous media outlets, including Cosmopolitan, Experience Life, the New York Daily News, Red Book, Self, Ladies Home Journal, Brain World Magazine, the Chicago Tribune, New York Daily News, WebMD, Livestrong.com, and on numerous regional and national radio and television programs, both domestically and abroad. Dr. McGrail is a proud veteran of our military, having served as a commissioned officer and aviator in the United States Coast Guard. After his military service, this varied man also enjoyed distinguished careers in commercial aviation and mass communications, film, television, and multimedia before answering the call to his true vocation to help people empower their lives. He resides in Los Angeles with his wife, Lynn Ann, and is an avid blue water fisherman and also enjoys gourmet cooking, golf, hiking, and camping in the study and exploration of native philosophy and spirituality.
How you doing today, John?
I am doing very well, Mo. How are you?
I'm doing great. I'm really excited to have you on the show, and I know Michael is as well. And tell us a little bit about yourself, the work that you're doing with hypnosis, there in Los Angeles, and then, we can get into the science, which, I love as well.
Sure. Well, I've been a private practitioner in clinical hypnotherapy for 16 years, and it's a very powerful tool, and I discovered it through my own journey, if you will. I was one messed up dude at one point in my life. I had an awful lot of hangups, insecurities, and whatnot that were holding me back. And I worked with a hypnotherapist that I happened to become friends with, and she helped me completely turn my life around in a very short period of time. So I discovered that hypnosis and hypnotherapy is a very, very powerful tool for facilitating personal and change and transformation. I had always been fascinated by the mind-body connection, and over the years, one thing led to another. And so, the universe, I think, just kind of, if you let it, it just brings you to a point. And everything came to a confluence at this one point in my life. And I said, okay, well, what are you going to do with yourself? I was 40-something, unemployed. I had been an executive for a media production company after a successful acting career. And I just kind of knew there was something more that I was supposed to do. So the short of it is I started looking at different possibilities, because throughout my career, my military career, my airline career, virtually my entire professional life, I always ended up being designated as an instructor in whatever I was doing. And I realized that what I loved to do, and all the jobs I ever had, what I loved to do most was teach and coach and mentor and guide people. And so one day I woke up, I opened the LA Times, and there was an ad for the Hypnosis Motivation Institute. And I remembered that my hypnotherapist, Wendy, had gone there. So I said, you know what, let me take a look at this. Called him up, went up the next day and interviewed and enrolled, and the rest is history. As I like to say, I haven't worked in 16 years.
Yeah, that's awesome. And can you give the audience just a little bit like a rundown on what hypnosis is and what exactly you're doing when you put someone in a hypnotic state?
Sure, it's really simple. A lot of people don't realize it because they see hypnosis shows in Las Vegas or they're very popular business conventions and whatnot, or conferences, because it's fun. You know, we watch our fellow people up there doing zany things, and we think, oh my God, they've certainly been taken over. But hypnosis is a natural state of consciousness. And every normal human brain enters hypnosis several times every day. Just some examples of naturally hypnotic moments. Whenever you watch a good movie or a TV show and you feel and have an emotional experience, you're actually in a state of hypnosis. You're watching something that's a complete illusion, but yet the feelings and the emotions you're feeling are very real. You are reacting to suggestions. When you daydream, it's a form of hypnosis. You know, you think back and you say, oh, I remember that girl back in high school. I was so in love with her, and you get a smile on your face and you feel that warm, fuzzy feeling. You're giving yourself hypnotic suggestions and your mind is responding. So it's a natural state of consciousness. We all experience it every day. And you can use that natural state of consciousness to entertain people in a show, or you can use it to create a very open, receptive state of mind to help you create personal change and growth, to get over unwanted or unhealthy habits or fears or phobias, limiting beliefs, low self-esteem. It's amazing. All of that is produced by the mind, and hypnosis simply creates an open, receptive state of mind that bypasses the normal resistance we all have to change. That's it in a nutshell. There's nothing mysterious about it. When you're in hypnosis, you're always awake, you're aware, you're in control, just like when you watch a good movie. You could stop watching the movie and walk out of the theater, but you don't want to. Same thing with hypnotherapy. It creates a state of mind where you can get in touch with that part of you that wants to make change and is having trouble with doing so.
John, what initially got you involved in hypnosis? I mean, going back further, there was something that happened that you're like, I'm very interested in this. Was it something that happened in your life that you're like, I really want to overcome some stuff?
Yeah, Michael, there was two things. When I was in the service and I was designated an aircraft commander, I was an aviator in the Coast Guard. And of course, in the Coast Guard, they don't send you out when the weather's good. They send you out when things are turning nasty and somebody's in trouble. And I was a young guy. It was a very stressful job. I was very type A personality back in those days. And I found a little book in a bookshop. It was called Hypno-Cybernetics. I still have it in my office. And I started practicing these exercises, and I found that it helped me stay calm and focus and concentrate, which helped me be a better aircraft commander, so I could keep the crew calm when things were going sideways in the middle of a tropical storm or a hurricane or whatever else we were messing with. And that it just generated this interest in the mind-body connection. And then, as I said, we were talking before the show, many years later, I came to a time in my life where I had to face my stuff, because we all have stuff. I was very insecure. I was addicted to tobacco. I was a type A personality, very compulsive, and not a very happy camper. Let's just put it that way. And I used hypnotherapy through the guidance of a brilliant gal to completely change my life around in a very, very short period of time. And so that's what sort of launched what I like to call my spiritual rediscovery of me. And then several years later, I was at a point in my professional career where I found myself unemployed and not knowing what I was going to do. I was kind of tired I was in media production at the time. And I realized that all the jobs I ever had I had always been designated a teacher or an instructor. And I realized that that's what I really love to do. So I looked at all different kinds of possibilities: divinity school, medical school, school teaching. And then I remembered hypnotherapy, and the course to get certified was only a year. Now I'm 40 something. I've got a wife. I've got a mortgage. I can't just take 10 years off to get a PhD in psychology or go to medical school. And so I looked into this school out in LA, the Hypnosis Motivation Institute, which was the first federally accredited college of hypnosis in the country, and went up to see them, visited, took the entrance exams, and found out it would be a good fit for me, and the rest is history.
Excellent. Yeah. Go ahead, Mo.
No, go ahead.
So at some point, I got into Native American spirituality, and that took my abilities as a Navy SEAL to a different level. We talked a little bit about that before the show, that you've actually touched on that as well. Can you go into that a little bit?
Absolutely. You know, there's a sixth sense that we all have. You know, you call it intuition, you can call it your gut, you can call it psychic ability. And unfortunately, in modern technology-driven society, you know, we've lost, in Western culture, we've lost our ability, largely, most people, to tap into that. But the native cultures of the world, the Native American, it doesn't matter what tribal culture you talk about or where they are, they rely on that sixth sense, that intuition, for their very survival. And, you know, it's really interesting. There's a great story. Do you remember the tsunami that happened in the Indonesian archipelago? I think it was around 2005 or 6.
Right.
Yeah. So thousands of people were killed in that tsunami. And a very interesting thing that didn't come out till probably 2 or 3 weeks after the tragedy, I saw this little article in the LA Times. And this was, I've been, like you, I've been interested in this stuff since I discovered it. And it's been a big part of my growth, and it's a big part of my practice. But anyway, there's this little article in the LA Times, and it showed a picture of a native tribesman holding up a spear, clearly toward a helicopter. It was taken from above, as if to say, go away, we don't want you modern people around. And the gist of the article was that while thousands of people and companion animals and livestock were killed by this thing, all the native people in the area got to higher ground. And the reason they got to higher ground is because they knew it was coming. They could sense it. That's how in tune they are with the earth and the energy of not just the earth, but of the universe. And so this author said, you know, these people, meaning the tribesmen, have a sixth sense that we don't have. And quite frankly, I laughed my butt off because we all have it. We just lost our ability to tap into it. And when you gain that ability, as you know, when you learn and train, it can be done. It takes a lot of time and practice. It's incredible what you can do.
Yeah, and let's get into the science a little bit. You mentioned, you know, the gut, the sixth sense, and I know you've written a dissertation, and that became your book, The Synthesis Effect, correct?
Yes.
So if we look at that, what's happening here, and they call the gut the second brain. I know when we're in an intuitive state, we're in touch with the environment. So it's almost like we're these like fungi sending these hyphae out, right? You know, from, you know, and I know that these microbiome are within our guts as well. So again, I'm going into a different phase there, but what is the science behind hypnosis, and then also the subconscious and the conscious?
Well, it's a big,
yeah.
And of course it's all connected. First of all, the science behind hypnosis is simply this: we have an inborn resistance to change. It is in our DNA, and we've inherited that from our earliest ancestors. Just imagine this tribe of people that finds a beautiful green valley and comfortable caves, and there's plenty of food and water, and they get real comfortable where they are. It becomes real familiar. They know where the trails are. They know where the predators are. And then this other tribe comes in and says, no, we want it. Get out of here. They don't want to move. And that's sort of how we develop this resistance to change. We, human beings, will cling to the familiar with tenacity, even when the familiar is painful. We'll, you know, look at battered housewives or battered husbands. They keep going back over and over and over again. And you say, well, what's wrong with them? Because the familiar is less scary than the unknown. And so the science behind hypnosis is that it just creates a state of consciousness that helps us bypass that inner resistance. We call it homeostasis in my field. It just sort of, that part of the brain turns off when you enter that state of consciousness. You can actually, it's really cool. You can wire somebody up to a PET scan and watch the screen as they go into hypnosis, and you can see which parts of the brain turn on and which parts of the brain turn off. And the part of the brain that turns off when you're in a deep hypnotic trance is the part that creates the resistance. And so now we create an open state of mind. And you mentioned the subconscious. The subconscious is like a 3-year-old child. It never gets more sophisticated than that. It doesn't know the difference between good or bad or happy or sad. That's all consciously generated. The subconscious, like any 3-year-old, will believe whatever you tell it. So you could teach a 3-year-old kid 2 + 2 is 4, great. Or you could teach that same little kid 2 + 2 is 5. And if you reinforce it through repetition, or if it's significant enough, that will become its program. The subconscious works a lot like a computer. Once it's programmed, it'll play its programs, good or bad, 5 or 4, doesn't matter to the subconscious, over and over and over again. And the science behind hypnosis is that it allows us to get by the barrier that resists change and talk to that little 3-year-old kid and say, hey, listen, little guy, or girl, you learned 2 + 2 is 5. How's that working for you? And of course, the kid says, it sucks, but that's all I know. And we say, well, guess what? You just got some bad programming.
Sure. Is that where the intuition is coming from, that 3-year-old guy, and we're communicating like the left and the right brain together and reasoning with it?
No, not really. I take the intuitive part of the mind as part of the subconscious, but I put that more in the realm of the spirit, which is our essential energy. That runs, the Native Americans, again, it's the spirit that runs through all things. So the science behind that, you have to turn to quantum physics and quantum wave theory, where we are proving through scientific experimentation that this universe and everything in it is really nothing more than a very primal energy expressed in innumerable ways. And so I like to think of it as a giant spider web. Everything that exists is in this giant web of energy. And as you said before, we are all connected to it because we're part of it. And when you learn to manipulate those connections, like the fungi, as you mentioned, sending out these little, and you connect to that, that's where the intuition comes in. It's just literally an energetic sense. We see light, we hear sound, we feel heat and whatnot. Well, that sixth sense is to be able to process pure energy in whatever form it comes. That's where in my view, that's where the intuition comes in.
Sure. And the program you often talk about, that's the 3-year-old child. That's, the first 8 years of our life, we kind of are programmed by our environment, by our parents and so forth. And we're kind of get into the state, and then we almost go into a hypnotic state as we get older. Sometimes we leave the learning to everybody else.
Absolutely. And, it's interesting because in this day and age, most of the people I see in my clinical practice come in with chronic stress and anxiety. And where does that come from? Well, look at our culture. Look at our civilization. We are chronically stressed and anxious as a culture, and we are bombarded by information 24 hours a day, 7 days a week through the media and the technology and all this stuff. And we are walking around in a form of hypnosis. You're absolutely right. We get conditioned, and then we just play the programs over and over again, even when they hurt.
So when I was teaching I started the SEAL Team's first hand program, we talked a lot about NLP, neuro-linguistic programming.
Yes. And
how once the guys started to understand how their brains were programmed for fear or stuff like that, we learned how to deprogram that out by, linguistics words. And then we started to focus them to the point where they're going to these alpha brainwave states and into this quantum realm. Is that some of the stuff that you're working with?
Exactly. That's exactly it. I'm trained and I've been certified in NLP for 15 or so years, and I use it all the time. Hypnosis. NLP taps into hypnosis and psychotherapy and Gestalt therapy. The guys that invented it or developed it up in Berkeley in the 70s, I think they were probably smoking a little too much weed, but they started asking some very cool questions. But it's really, if you think about neuro, the mind, linguistic, the way we communicate, and the programs we run to get what we want. And so, NLP, this all is related, and it all comes together really beautifully, which was the whole purpose of the book I wrote.
Sure. And then if you look at what Michael was just talking about, the military and what he did, as a SEAL team leader, you look at the other military outfits as well. So they're all using this a little bit in what they're doing, even though they might not know it consciously, as far as the leaders, the platoon leaders, the sergeants, and so forth. Right.
And in the line of work that Michael was in, that sort of ability will take you a long way to getting home.
Sure.
But because, I can't fathom what it's like beside what a few friends that have been on the teams have told me. But, they're in extremely extremist situations, on the other side of the world. They either get in or they get out, and you need every edge. And what people don't realize is that what we are just learning now was intuitively, innately, instinctively part of, or is, all the native tribes people, the indigenous peoples of the world live this way. Because if they don't live in balance with the earth, if they don't have that sense, they don't survive. And so there's nothing new here. We're just rediscovering what's already been there.
Absolutely. And I mean, people, talk about how, oh, you've been in combat, and I tell everybody, well, combat was easy because of the training I went through. And that's kind of like tying into that information. It's like we're talking about the fungi, the little feelers that are out there. You learn how to dial your station in. You can dial into what's a threat to you, and it's the same for everyone. We kind of all go through combat in our lives. We feel like we're in a war sometimes, inner war or outer war. Learning how to deal with that stress and push beyond it is the key, and the things that all of us are trying to help people come to.
That's a really good point, Michael. And as I said, 90%, probably maybe more than that, of the people that I see today, and they're as young as 8-year-olds. I got little kids with anxiety issues, and all chronic stress and anxiety trigger the fight-flight mechanism. And the fight-flight mechanism, as you so well know, is our survival instinct. It intensifies all of our senses, but it's supposed to be a short-term occurrence to get you out of trouble, to get you back into safety, and then you calm down and your sympathetic nervous system takes back over and you get back to normal. But when it's triggered all the time, and in a combat situation, these poor kids over there, 24/7, it's not, and now in just society in general, it's not life and death, but people make it like it's life and death, and it really messes you up.
Sure. And if we look at our society, Dr. John, as far as I'm a new small business owner and it's growing, I have employees that I'm hiring, I'm managing them, I'm managing jobs, things are happening. I have to get new jobs. I have to make payroll, so it's not something, I know I chose, of course, this path as far as a small business owner. I could be an employee or whatever, but, I don't choose to be stressed. I wish I could be namaste, all day. That's what my son says to me. But it's really hard, even when I'm thinking about it, because I get caught up in the moment. I'm getting 10 texts and, I got to get to a podcast and just the stress of everything. What does someone like me do to help that? Is it hypnotherapy? Is it something like that, or meditation? What do you recommend?
Yeah, both, actually, all of the above. It really is hypnotherapy. I combine meditation with hypnotherapy. They work so well together. Hypnosis is a state of consciousness that's great for creating change in a short period of time. And meditation is a state of consciousness that's great for maintaining that systemic well-being over a long period of time. So they work really well together. But the essence of it is to realize, and I used to say this to the kids that worked for me when I was back in media production, and we were working for very high-powered clients and multi-million-dollar budgets, and the company I worked for was great. There were about 5 adults in the company, and we hired these kids right out of school that were very bright but green, and we would sort of babysit and throw them into the blades and then help them, and I didn't own the company, but I was one of the adults. But anyway, I used to say to them, listen, if it's not life and death, if someone's not on the floor bleeding out, then we're not going to stress about it, okay? It's just a project. We will figure it out. And, maybe part of that is my military training, because in the military, as Michael so well knows, even more than I, but, as a pilot, all we did was practice for emergencies. Practice, practice, practice. That's all you do. So when one happens and it is life and death, you do what you're supposed to do. You respond in a way that hopefully saves you, the crew, and the airplane or your squad. And it's the same thing in business. If you train your mind and are consistent with it, you get to a place where you can have all those texts coming in and you can have all that stuff happening, but you can maintain that balance and that calm sense of well-being while you're handling it and come out the other end much more powerful.
Sure. And what it takes for me is just consciously thinking about it all the time. Just like you'd said, hey, it's not the end of the world. I've done this before. I'm going to make it happen. I always think of solutions, but it's hard, when you're in the moment. So I think, of course, I need to meditate myself. I don't do it enough. What would you recommend to people out there to kind of get started on this path? Say they're a small business owner or they're really stressed out at home. what do you recommend these people do to kind of change their lives and change that program?
Sure. Well, I work with them every day, really. And one of the exercises I give every new client, and I teach to my workshop students and seminar audiences, is it's very simple. You find some time once or twice a day. And I'll just say this before I even introduce the exercise. Consistency is the key. If you don't do it consistently, then it can't have any power. But you just sit quietly, make sure you're not going to be disturbed, turn off the phone, kick the cat out of the room, close your eyes, relax your body, really just let your body go loose and limp and let your jaw get slack, and you don't care what anybody's, and then you take 21 slow, deep breaths. And I'll just demonstrate it real quickly. I'll just do one. I mean, really slow. You just breathe in through your nose. You got your eyes closed. And you take your time. Notice I'm in no hurry to get to the top. And when I get to the top, I hold it for just a moment, and then I gently release it just as slowly and just as gently. And I do 21 of those. I count from 21 to 0. Now, the rule is if you lose count, and I guarantee you the first few times you try it, you will lose count, maybe several times, which will show you just how scattered our minds are on a day-to-day basis in this culture. If you start over and you just keep at it until you get through 21 breaths in a row. And when you're finished with 21 breaths, then you imagine you're in a place that you really, really like. Like for me, there's a beach on the North Shore of Kauai that I absolutely adore. It's where they shot the movie South Pacific. It is just so beautiful. I'm on that beach and I'm just visualizing myself the way I want to be in that given moment. So I want to be calm because I've got to get all these texts done. I have a meeting tomorrow about the payroll, and I want to really, really program myself. So it's almost like watching a movie in your head. It's sort of a form of self-hypnosis and meditation combined. And at the end of that, you hold the feeling. Oh yeah, this feels so good. That's what I want to be. I want to be calm. I want to be cool. I don't want to lose my temper. Yeah, I got it. And you hold that feeling for as long as you can. If you do that every single day for 3 weeks, that's the challenge I usually offer. 21 days in a row, at least once a day. I promise you at the end of 3 weeks, you'll feel like a different human being. I promise. And that's with no outside guidance. Now, if you combine that with a little outside help from a professional, you could be Gumby in 21 days.
Pliable.
That's fantastic. That's amazing, because that's exactly what we used to teach in the hand-to-hand course. We'd have this one drill where the whole class would attack one person. And
oh my God.
We kept, iterating over and over again. Breathe, deep breathing. We had meditations in the class too. But we taught everyone 21 days creates a habit. So that's beautiful. You're doing these deep breathing and 21 days, because I can tell you from the most intense type of stuff that really does work. So that's beautiful you're doing that.
Well, it's amazing to me to learn that you actually use those techniques. I never thought of it, but now that I think of it, it absolutely makes such sense.
Yeah, it puts you in those states of consciousness like we've been talking about. I noticed on your website, drjohnmcgrail.com, that you have excellent testimonials from a wide range of people, teachers, business executives, so forth. Can you give us an example of someone that you've worked with that you might be able to share?
Oh, wow. That's tough. I've had so many, and there's so many cool cases. Right off the top of my head, a person comes to mind. This is cool, and it's going to get into another realm a little bit too, so you might enjoy this one. But I had a lady call me from San Francisco, and I'm in LA, as you guys know. I don't know if the audience knows that, but I'm based in Los Angeles. She was in San Francisco. And she said, I have suddenly developed this incredible, horrible fear of death. I can't function. Every waking moment, I am just consumed with this feeling of dread. So I said, well, and she told me how it started. She was driving across the Oakland Bay Bridge, and she had her top down in a convertible, and she was stuck in traffic, and she looked up at the clouds. And how you look at the clouds and you see things in the clouds, and she was doing that just to pass the time because nobody was going anywhere. And this doom, this sudden feeling of impending doom, crossed over her, and she couldn't get rid of it. So the first thing I said was, look, I can't do this on the phone because I work with people all over the world, but this needs personal attention. So I recommend you find somebody up there. Gave her a couple of hints as to how to do that. Anyway, long story short, about 3 or 4 weeks later, she called back and she said, look, I want to work with you. So I said, well, if you can come down to LA, I'll tell you what we'll do. I usually see people once a week. I'll schedule 3 sessions over the course of the week, and we'll see if we can't figure this out. So she said, okay, good, I'm going to do it. So she came down and we did the first session, which is mostly get to know you, what's going on, and introducing her to the techniques. And she did very, very well. And then in the second session, I put her into a deep state of hypnosis, and I brought her back. I had her sort of review her life to see if I could find an incident, because when you're in that state of consciousness, memories that you don't even know you have can pop up. And I just brought her all the way back to her childhood to see if there was something that had happened that had been repressed that came out, and nothing happened. And so I don't know why I had this inspiration, but I said, you know what, just keep going back through this lifetime into any other lifetime, but just keep going back in time and just see if your subconscious, your spiritual mind has something for you. And so nothing's happening. And all of a sudden she goes like that, you know, and I almost jumped out of my chair because it was so quiet in the room. So anyway, she's still in hypnosis. I said, okay, tell me what's happening. And she said, I'm a young girl. I'm 15 years old. I've been accused of a murder that I didn't commit, and they're about to hang me. And just before they put the hood over my head, I looked up and saw the clouds.
Wow.
And so, yeah.
That's pretty heavy.
It still hits me today. So I said, well, notice that your spirit survived. It was just your physical body. You're here. You've had other lifetimes. You're safe. And now I want you to gently come back. So I brought her back, and then I brought her out of hypnosis. And she looked up at me from the chair and she said, Dr. John, I'm good. I don't need the third session. Thank you. And that was it. She was done. So I will never, excuse me, forget that one as long as I live. One, because it scared me. And two, because the change was so amazing, it was instantaneous. Now, did she have that life for sure? Did that really happen to her? Who knows? We can't prove it. But, you know, it doesn't matter because she was better. And that's the power of this stuff. The mind creates wellness and it creates dis-ease. And when you learn how to tap into the power of your mind, you can create either one or undo either one.
That's an amazing story. I had a young man that I was working with kind of similarly, and he had a fear of the water. He wanted to become an Navy SEAL, but had fear of the water. So that's a tough one to do.
Yeah.
So he'd seen some stuff in my in the book that I've written a couple of books. So he was like, you know, I had these memories. So we went into his memories, and he actually got to the point where he was on the Titanic. And once he discovered that he had drowned on the Titanic, he overcame all of his fears and became a great swimmer. So it's amazing that you can't really, you know, put a blinders on for this information, because it can really take you to some different places.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. And sorry to interrupt there, guys. I just, you know, I remember some of my, you know, teachings on DNA, and then also, you know, Plato had said all learning is remembering. And that always struck a chord with me. I'm big on Gnosis and Gnosticism, and it's based on a spiritual understanding. So when you had told me the story of the lady, and she was driving across the bridge and she looked up, and she basically went into this state of depression, you know, anxiety. And then you brought her back through hypnosis to a past life where she literally was doing the same thing at the point of death. You know, so it seems like this memory triggered something in this life that brought on that anxiety. And if you know the science, of course, I know you do, Dr. John McGrail, is that, you know, we carry these genetic memories. You know,
absolutely. Sure.
Yeah. So it's really interesting how that all plays. And then, you know, you're telling the story, and I'm like going, the science is there verifying exactly everything that she's saying and what Michael's saying too. So.
Well, yeah, the science is there, and it's actually been there for a very long time. And it's kind of interesting is that the concept of reincarnation and living many lives was sort of a universal concept throughout the history of the development of civilization until the year 500 AD, where a meeting was held by the church in Constantinople. And I'm not denigrating any particular religious belief, but the Catholic Church had a meeting. They had 2 popes in those days. They didn't even invite the guy from Rome because they were pissed off at him. But they just, you know, I can't remember what they call it, but if you look up 500 AD Constantinople, that's when they got rid of the Gnostic Gospels. They said, no, we can't have that. And they said, oh yeah, this reincarnation stuff, no, that's got to go, because if they think they're going to have more than one life, they won't toe the line. And so they said, okay, you get one shot, and if you don't do it our way, then you go to hell. And that's how that all started. And then the Jewish religion said, yeah, you know what, you guys have a point. So then they got rid of reincarnation. But up until then, and most of the cultures and philosophies around the world, again, if you look at the indigenous cultures of the world, the people that started, they all believe that our spirit carries over through lives, and that we do bring these memories into our genetics. And that brings up a whole new field, epigenetics, which is incredible. They're proving now that just because you have the DNA for something doesn't mean that you're going to necessarily have it expressed. Your environmental inputs and how you go about doing the business of your life can make the difference between whether, let's say you have a gene for cancer, when maybe you will get cancer, but it doesn't necessarily have to happen just because the gene is there. So these preserved memories, this concept of spirit traveling through many incarnations, is becoming popular again, because now the science, which we have to have, we got to, if you can't prove it, I won't believe it. Now the science is proving that what these people have known for millennia is absolutely fact.
Yeah, epigenetics is fascinating. I've been into that. I teach that in my courses that I teach as well. But epigenetics is. Can you explain that a little bit more in detail?
Well, I'm not by any stretch of the imagination, an expert on it. And if anybody wants some expert input, there's a guy named Bruce Lipton, Dr. Bruce Lipton. I don't know if you've read any of his stuff, Michael.
Oh, yeah.
I've interviewed him myself.
Yeah, I've met him, and I've read his books, and he's just an amazing guy. But essentially, epigenetics is a branch of genetics. Well, let's start with genetics. Genetics is all about DNA. And of course, DNA rules all life. If you have the DNA for brown hair, you get brown hair. If you have the DNA or the gene for being tall or short or whatever, I got short genes, so I never could play for the NFL, which was my dream when I was a kid. But what we are proving now is that just because you have the gene for a particular characteristic or disease or not, the environmental inputs, how you live, how you think, what the mind does has an awful lot to do with as to whether that gene will actually express. So what it essentially says is that we have so much power in our mind. If we learn how to tap into and use the energy of our mind, which is just the universal energy of all that exists, we have a lot more control over our physical and emotional life than we think we do. Maybe that's the easiest way to express it. And that's what the experimentation is in epigenetics is to see just how much there is. And it's quite a lot more than anybody thought.
Yeah, it's we're taught that our DNA is set, but
yes.
Epigenetics teaches that it can be influenced by your consciousness and environment. So we can actually influence our DNA to change, literally change. And if we have diseases and so forth, people are cured of diseases. That's not to say that, just by thinking positive thoughts, you're going to cure disease, but there has been incredible evidence that is going on. And you can probably speak a little bit more since you've actually interviewed Dr. Lipton.
No, I never interviewed him. I met him.
Okay.
I've had a chat with him. I've never interviewed him, but I've read a lot of his stuff, and we had a chance to talk a little bit. I actually was just telling him when I met him how much his work influenced my thinking, because he's quoted quite a bit in my book. But this whole thing, in his book, one of his most famous book is called The Biology of Belief. And it's all about using the power of your mind, and spirituality is brought into this to have a direct effect on your physical condition. There's also another guy that's very famous named Norman Cousins, who was an editor for the New Yorker magazine, and he got diagnosed with a terminal disease. And they basically said, listen, there's nothing we can do. You got about maybe 6 months at get your affairs in order. And at the time he said, you know what, I'm not ready to check out. And he checked himself into a hotel room for weeks. I don't know how long it was exactly. And he watched comedy, movies like The Three Stooges, all day, all night, every day and every night. He just laughed himself back into health. Now, the interesting thing is, not only is this documented, but UCLA was just beginning to develop a department that now has been in existence for quite a while. It's called the Psychoneuroimmunology Department. Psycho, the mind, neuro, the nervous system, immunology, our ability to resist disease. So they were starting to research this stuff. How much does the mind really contribute to our physical well-being or disease. They heard about Norman Cousins and they invited him out, and he helped them get that department up and running. And now, as you said, Michael, it's a burgeoning science, and it's changing the entire model of how we practice medicine. The allopathic medical model is going to be ancient history in a generation or so, because now they're realizing that the mind and body cannot be separated.
Yeah, it's interesting you're talking about that and using the mind to heal. I recently watched an interview with the Iceman, and they actually have scientists that, are studying him to see if, what he's doing is bunk, or if he's trying to pull one on some people. But they actually injected him with live viruses, and they had computers and different things set up to him, and he would get into a meditative state, and they would actually measure him being able to concentrate his immune system to these spots where this virus went into it, and he would kill it literally instantaneously. And I don't know exactly, I'm not real fluent on the science on exactly what was happening, but yeah, this is real, and you're able to do that with your mind. And I think, people like the Iceman, Michael Jaco, these people that get into these incredible states of mind, and they reach incredible levels of, physical fitness and mental fitness as well. I think those are the people that can take this science to the next level and prove to us that I think you can heal anything, any disease, if you're in control of your mind like that at that level.
Yeah, another guy, Master John Douglas, is an Australian. I don't know if you've heard of him, but he is an intuitive clairvoyant and a healer, and I've seen him work. And it's just amazing to watch it. And it's even more amazing to actually experience it. I went to a seminar that he was facilitating. And as part of the seminar, you got 5 minutes with him. And so he said, he's a really nice guy too, and talking about all the stuff we're talking about. So he said, is there anything particularly bothering you? And I said, well, yeah, as a matter of fact, I've got my right hip has been killing me. I play a lot of golf, and and so he said, he looked and he said, yeah, you've got some inflammation going on there. And he said, just hang on for a second. And he kind of closed his eyes, or half closed his eyes, and cocked his head a little bit. And I'm just sitting there thinking, oh, what's going on? And I could just kind of feel an energy. That's the only way I can describe it. Not in my hips, but just in the room. It was definitely a vibe going on. And then he said, okay, he said, that ought to do it. And I'm thinking, all right. So we chatted for a couple more minutes, and I stood up because my time was up. And sure enough, the pain was gone. So go figure.
Yeah. So he's tapping into his energy. I know there's not a science there, but he's flowing. And it kind of reminds me of Reiki, the Reiki healing as well as what they do there, the energy healing. And obviously he was a master at doing that.
Well, yeah, I would liken him more to the Iceman. He's connecting. If you go back to where we started, if we just think that the entire universe, everything that exists is one matrix of energy, and they have found the elemental piece of energy called the Higgs boson, which is what everything is made of. These people apparently have the ability to marshal that energy in ways that most of us don't. It's just like, if we go back to the sixth sense, that intuitive sixth sense, some people can really tap into it and use it. And most of us in Western culture, because we don't, but it's there. And so, these people are definitely not woo-woo anymore, because now we have the technology, we can watch it happen. And, one of the things that I always try to teach my clients that I learned from my Native American teachers, which is where I got most of my spiritual training. We have been taught to think in a very empirical way. I'll believe it when I see it. That's the whole basis of our philosophy and science. The native peoples of the world, the primitive peoples, think exactly the opposite. They believe in order to see, and they expect to see what they believe in. And sure enough, that seems to be the way manifestation actually occurs.
Yeah, I've done that to a lot of my life. I look back on the things that I wanted to accomplish, being a CEO, working with the CIA and so forth. Like I had that in my thoughts very early on, at early age, and then eventually they materialize. So that's one thing I think is very powerful. Another guy that's really into this stuff is Dr. Joe Dispenza, and he's written several books on the information that we're going into right now. Some of them, You Are the Placebo. So you really, if you focus your mind on some of this stuff, he's got some great examples of where they brought in these gentlemen that were like in their 70s or 80s.
Yes.
They had them going to this one House, you probably heard of the story.
I've read the book.
Oh, okay, great. And so they're in there that everything, the music is like 20 or 30 years, earlier, maybe even more, like maybe 50 years. I forget exactly what it was, but it was definitely further back in time. So the papers they read, so they started having conversations like they would, talking about, who's going to win the World Series, all these kind of things. And then eventually these guys, like some of them are Canes and stuff, they're out playing like touch football. It's crazy. They really got into going back in time. And not only was it, mentally, but also physiologically. So they actually, study these guys physiologically, and they had gone back in time. It's crazy.
Yes. Wow. Yes. Yeah. That's the cool thing. We need to see the science. It's there. And, when a lot of people think, well, that's way beyond whatever I could do. And, you are limited by your beliefs, but it's amazing. And really what I'm about every day is just helping people get exposed to the possibilities. And it's really amazing to see someone that comes in with what they think is an intractable issue. I'm stuck with this. I've tried everything. This isn't going to work. You're my last hope. And then in a couple of weeks, they're feeling like a whole new person. And then you see the whole sort of domino stack just sort of falling because they realize, hey, I can do this. And then they're off to the races. And that is the most fun of all.
And getting people to that point is quite a challenge. What are the techniques that you do to get them to think and believe?
Well, as you know in the books, I've got some models. The first of all, most of the people that come to me who are not referrals come to me because they are at their wits' end. They've tried everything. And so they say, okay, well, I've got nothing to lose. And that's what they'll say to me, you're my last hope. And I always start with saying, well, look, here's what you're going to have to bring to the party to make this happen. You're going to have to want it. You have to commit to yourself. It's not magic. So if you think it's magic, go home, because my magic wand doesn't work. These are just energetic states. You have to want it. You have to commit. You have to be willing to really treat yourself with love, honor, and respect. And then I inject intention and the magic of all, expectation. I said, I want you to start expecting that you're going to get what you want. And since you have nothing to lose, this is your last hope, why not just play my game with me, okay? And so you've got nothing to lose. And so that's how I do it. I just say, give this a shot. Let's see what your mind can do. And usually within a couple sessions, even after the first session, they feel a shift. They feel a possibility. And then we really amp up the expectation. And the next thing they know, that whatever it was isn't anymore. And now they can turn to the other issues of their life because they realize just how powerful they are. And that gets us back to where we started, Michael, before the show, talking about the fact that we all have everything we need within us to create whatever change we want. It's just learning how to tap into it. And usually that requires a little help. But everybody, and anybody that's listening to this out there, whatever your issue, you have whatever you need inside of you already to get over it. You're probably going to need a little help to tap into it. But once you do, the sky's the limit. If these guys, and this is documented, this is not a wives' tale, this is scientifically documented, those gentlemen who were exposed to their younger selves, I think it was about 3 weeks, they lived in that isolated environment where they were 1984 to 1954. And for those 3 weeks, it was 1954 again. And they physiologically, as you said, they regressed. Their bodies were younger and healthier. And of course, the scientists are scratching their heads. Well, how could this be? Well, it's all about energy. It's the power of the mind.
Yeah, that's an amazing story. And it reminds me when you were telling the story when you were in Kauai where you like to meditate and, your favorite beach, you're putting yourself there visually. You've been there. And of course, that feeling, epigenetics, right? And it kind of registers in our DNA, and I believe that's kind of where we change it. And where we're damaging it is forgetting that and not having fun and not relaxing, and that anxiety and all that stress and all these programs out in the world start to weigh on us. And then they kind of take over the old programs, the good ones that we had. And we get stuck on like a broken record, and sometimes we fix it. Cause I've done I fixed it, did meditation and was going great. And then I had something happen in my life where I regressed and I fell off my path and I started drinking again and doing things that were self-destructive, that dark energy. And then it was just so much harder to get out. I'm still kind of getting out of that right now. And I know I need to do your 21-day challenge because I have a bad habit. You know, I go 2 or 3 days and then I break it, you know, and it's just not doing that quiet time because I'm working 12, 16 hours a day. But if I'm going to change, I've got to make that time.
Yeah. And if you do make that time, it's one of the greatest gifts you can give yourself. You know, it's a great point that you make, Mo. And I do believe this is a cultural phenomenon. First of all, the human mind evaluates our life experience in terms of one very simple concept, and that concept is contrast. And if you go back to what we were talking about, the subconscious being like a computer that's programmed, a mechanical computer uses zeros and ones. That's all computers do, zeros and ones, billions and billions of zeros and ones. The human computer, the subconscious spiritual mind, uses positives and negatives. That's our computer language. And we have become singularly talented at focusing on what I like to call the dark side of the contrast equation in modern culture. Negativity, insufficiency, gloom, doom, fear. You know, you turn on the news. We talked about it before. You're bombarded 24 hours a day. You turn on the news. What do you hear? All the crap that's going on in the world. I think there should be a law. And I really believe that they should say, okay, ladies and gentlemen, good evening to Eyewitness News. We're about to scare the hell out of you. That's what they pay us all this money for. But before we tell you about all the bad stuff that's going on so that you get more stressed and more anxious because we want you to die young, remember this one salient fact, that most of the planet and most of the people on the planet right now are perfectly fine. Just focus on that. But now let's go to the stuff that's not. And it's, the truth of the matter is, most of the planet at any given moment in time is fine. But like you said, you get into these patterns and they're reinforced. And so the chemicals of stress, cortisol and adrenaline, are very powerful chemicals, but they're meant to get us out of these life and death situations and survive. They're not meant to be in our system 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. And what happens is, like you get into a situation, you're working 12, 16-hour days, you're trying to make something work, and you don't have the outlet. You don't have that consistent practice of balancing your energies, which is really all it does. That's all meditation really does. Then, you know, anything out of balance, if it gets out of balance enough, is going to fall. It's going to break. And that's how we get all these wacky diseases. And nervous breakdowns and strokes. And people, a friend of ours, my wife and I, a 35-year-old woman just died of a heart attack. 35-year-old people are not supposed to die of heart attacks. You know, it's a sin, but it's preventable. And so you're right. If you give yourself that time and just try for 21 days, that's all. And I mean, it's 3 weeks. What's 3 weeks? You can stand on your head for 3 weeks. If you don't feel like a different human being and want to keep doing it, I would be amazed. I have never had a client, and we're talking thousands of people now over the last 15 years that has tried that, because everybody gets it, that didn't come in and say, man, I love that exercise. I feel so good.
Yeah. Go ahead, Michael.
Dr. John, I've heard you mention it, the fun. So you would think that, and love. So these things I focus on as well. You would think that being in combat is not fun, but I had fun. I had good time. When I jumped out of airplanes, it was fun. When I blew stuff up, it was fun. When I shot weapons, it was fun. You know, so life is like that. Just have fun with it. You know, just you think, oh, you're crazy. You like, go to combat, you have fun. Yeah, I did, because that's the way I am. That's the way I program my mind to everything that I'm doing. I'm going to have fun, and I'm going to make it a game, and I'm going to be the best at it. You know, so that's why I've been in combat for 13 plus years and never got a scratch. So,
well, my hat's off to you on that one. And as I say in rule number one in my methodology, as you know, is that life is supposed to be fun. Now, fun is different for different people, but what you described, now for me, that wouldn't be fun. But maybe, you flying an airplane in a hurricane might not be fun. And for me in the day, that was
I don't even want to go in an airplane. All right.
So there you go. So, everybody's fun is different, but the bottom line is if you wanted to define it, it's not an endless sense of parties and hedonistic experiences. It's that you're living your life in a way you're making choices that feel good. You like the relationships you're in. You love, hopefully, what you do for a living. So when you wake up in the morning, you're really anxious and you're excited to get to the day, whatever that day is, whether it's, jumping out of an airplane. And the thing that I always think is really crazy about you SEALs is getting shot out of a torpedo tube. There is no way on God's green earth you're going to put me in a torpedo tube, okay?
Oh,
that would not be fun.
Great. I love it.
Maybe back, if I was 20 again and the X gene hadn't died, my X gene's dead. It's gone, but in the day, maybe that would have been. But the thing is, if you're living your life that way and you feel fully alive and you love the choices you're making and you love yourself, that makes life a very, very pleasant experience. And that's what I mean when I say that. And that's what I help my clients and students do, like you do. Find your fun, whatever that is.
Sure. And if you look at people that are busy, and then you had told the story about those people that went back in time and they lived for 21 days, like their childhood, is a lot of us need to institute that fun back in our lives. Even if, say, our daily job ain't fun, maybe we make a game out of it. Like Jaco says, Michael Jaco, make it a game some of our days with clients and people in these jobs, and try to be the best that we could be at this game. And at the same time is add some fun activities into it. And it needs to happen or you're going to break not only the meditative and the hypnotic states to relax, but also the fun to keep you happy.
Absolutely. I use that concept all the time with people who have mental blocks, like, people who have to take the bar exam or the medical licensing exam. I'm working with a 15-year-old kid now that's got a problem with geometry. And this is another really cool example. So I said to her, what do you like to do? She said, well, I like puzzles. So I said, well, you know what? A geometry problem is a puzzle. You know all the theorems, put the pieces of the puzzle and just figure out where they go. Try that. Make it a game. So it's not this torturous experience. And you're right, Mo, when you make these difficult or onerous tasks a game, you change your attitude. When you change your attitude, you change your energy. And it's all about energy. It's just how you use it. So absolutely, that can be a big help. And then, yes, I'm sure you guys know this. There's an old saying that no one ever goes to the other side or leaves the earth wishing they had worked harder.
Sure. Yeah.
Yeah, find some time to play.
Sure.
Yeah, the stress is definitely the killer. So learn to play, and then it's everything about you just becomes more alive. Your cells, work better. That's why we get diseases a lot of times, because we're stressed out. Why we age faster than we should be. I worked with guys for many years that were half my age, and kept up with them. They looked up to me as like the model that they wanted to be. So it's you can set those examples, but you have to have the love for what you do, like you were talking about. And if you don't have the love for it, just find something that you have passion for, and then focus on that. It could be anything in life.
Yeah, it's really interesting that. Again, I always go back to the indigenous peoples of the world, because I've learned so much of what I know from them. But they instinctively, live in balance. They work hard to survive, and they live in balance with the earth. And part of their life is always about games. And many of their games are games that help them become better hunters or fishermen or whatever it is. But the point is that the people who live with this energetic balance that we're talking about now don't suffer from all these wacky diseases like IBS and bipolar and Crohn's and lupus and all these autoimmune deficiencies that plague Western culture. They don't have any of those diseases until they start living the way we do, and then they are decimated by it. So yeah, you couldn't be right or more correct, Michael.
And I know you're a doctor, right? So, and you have your own practice. You're in Los Angeles, one of the most expensive areas to live. So I'm assuming you have the natural stresses like much of us business owners have and so forth. What are you doing personally for yourself? Are you just doing what you had mentioned to us, or is there something else that you're doing?
No, I practice the synthesis effect. I mean, one of the things that I realized, and this wasn't always the case. I learned this over years. When I first opened my practice, I yes, I suffer from, or I'm exposed to all the stresses. LA is a very expensive place to live. My office rent goes up every year. But I practice what I preach, because I realize if I don't practice what I preach, if I don't walk the walk and talk the talk, I can't teach it. I can't profess it. And I'm so adamant about professing this to my clients and my students that I would be a fraud if I didn't do it. So anything that you read in the book, it's in the book because I do it and it works. And, you know, I'm fortunately so far, I don't do sick. I'm healthy and you know, I can keep up with guys a lot younger than I am, and people don't even know how old I am, and I'm not going to say it, but I'm older.
Great.
So yeah, I just do what I preach. I do what I teach because it's what I learned and I know it works. And what I do really is just pass on what I've learned to other people.
Yeah, and let me add to the audience out there, you know, I did a lot of research on Dr. John McGrail, and he's one of the few doctors in the country that has 5 stars on basically every rating system you could find, and they're glowing reviews. So I really love to see that, you know, actual testimonies of people that have done this hypnotic therapy, you know, not just your stories, but to actually research it and see that you're making a change out there. So it's awesome to see, John.
Well, thank you very much. It's awfully kind of you to say. I appreciate that a lot.
You're welcome.
So we also talked a little bit about your might be taking this into the movie or showbiz realm. What can you offer on that? Tell us a little bit about that.
Yeah, because I'm in LA, I get exposed to a lot of people in the industry, and there are 2 sort of chains of activity going on now. One is the Dr. John TV show, which I would love to get up if I could, and it would really be a show that stars the most fascinating creatures on the planet, human beings, and the purpose of the show would be to teach people that, you know, watch everyday people that have these problems, watch them go through the transformation to get on the other side of them, and teach some of these techniques, bring other experts in, like the Bruce Liptons of the world, the Michael Jacos of the world, and just really expose millions of people to the fact that life doesn't have to be the drudge we've been told it has to be, that it, you know, this no pain, no gain stuff, that's just a bunch of crap, if you don't excuse me. So the Dr. John show is in various stages of development. And then the other thing is there's a production company that thinks that my book, The Synthesis Effect, would be a great movie, along the lines of The Secret. But I don't mean to sound immodest, but the producer that originally came up with the concept said, you know, your book goes where The Secret doesn't go. It shows people how to really do this, rather than just sitting thinking about it and having something magically appear. So those are the 2 big things now, and you know, from that hopefully is going to be a speaking tour. I'd like to take this out to I have done it before, but I want to get another national speaking workshop tour going, and just the more people that can start living this way, the faster we're going to save our civilization. I know that sounds woo-woo, but the path we're on now is not a good one, because we're so out of balance energetically. So if I can be a small part of that, whether it's the TV show or the movie or both, I'm writing another book, and you've got books, and, you know, if you can get people to just give it a chance, and then they see that it works. The one thing that I think is really in our favor is the viral nature of information transfer nowadays. You know, if we can watch a tragedy happen in real time halfway around the planet, why can't we also show people all the good things that can happen and that are happening? And so that's my whole bent on the bigger scale. So yeah, hopefully the Dr. John TV show, maybe a radio show, and then the film. In fact, I was supposed to meet with the production company this morning, and they canceled because it rained. Rain in LA is like, you know, the whole world comes to an end. I don't know why, but
Yeah, I see a transmutation conference in the future somewhere in California, maybe.
That would be a very cool thing to get all of us together and just really, you know, that would be a very cool thing.
Definitely.
So yeah, good luck with that. I hope that happens. That's amazing.
Well, I'll let you know. You're going to be on the show.
Oh, thank you. I'd love to.
Yeah, and if you could tell the audience exactly how they can maybe get in touch with you or what you offer to people out there.
Sure. Well, you mentioned my websites. Well, first of all, the easiest way is just to Google Dr. John McGrail. There are a couple other Dr. John McGrails, but I'm the only one that does hypnotherapy. The other one's an MD. I'm a PhD. And you'll get my websites and all kinds of stuff. I have a YouTube channel, and I've got a little video series on that YouTube channel, Dr. John McGrail. It's called A Better You, which is the name of my company, in a minute or two. And it's a series of little videos, 3, 4, 5 minutes long, that just help people live better on a day-to-day basis, little practical tips. If you go to my websites, Hypnotherapy Los Angeles, all one big word, .com, hypnotherapylosangeles.com, or as you mentioned, drjohnmcgrail.com, which was my other website. There's tons of information there, and you can also reach me directly. My email address is there, my phone number's there, and if anybody's interested in their call, this is a promise that I made when I first started doing these shows. If someone reaches out, you will get a personal response from me. So if you call me, you will hear from me. It may take a day or two, but I will get back to you personally. I don't have my people do that. And I'm happy to answer questions. Initial consultations are always completely free. If you, and there's never any obligation, but I'm really passionate about helping people just consider the possibility that the life they think they're stuck with, maybe they're not stuck with. And so if you reach out, I will respond to you. I have products for sale for do-it-yourself for hypnotherapy on my websites. They're very, very effective. They're based on all the programs that I use and have perfected in the clinic over 16 years and thousands of sessions. So yeah, I appreciate that. No, I'm out there and I'm happy to respond to anybody that has questions or might even think about wanting to work with me. I have clients all over the world. Thanks to Zoom like this and the other technologies, I can work with people anywhere.
That's great. That's great. You want to add anything, Michael?
No, I mean, brilliant information. I'm so happy that you chose to be with us today, and I wish you the best of luck with your information and going and taking it to everyone, because like you said, it's very valuable and a lot of people can benefit from it. And normally we get the people that are like, downtrodden, but we like to work with people that are already happy and having, a successful life, and we can take it even further as, successful people as well.
I'm so glad you mentioned that, Michael. And by the way, both of you are, with this show and what you're doing are providing an amazing service. And I'm so gratified and humbled to have been invited to join you today. And I thank you again. But it's not all about people that are broken that we're fixing. I work, and I know you do. Well, just think of what you talked about before with the teams. The SEAL teams are the elite military organization on the planet, as far as I'm concerned. There aren't very many that can do what you guys do. And I maybe know a little bit more because I was in the service, and I know people. But there you guys are at the top of your game, and you're using these techniques to get even better. And I work with a lot of athletes, writers, actors, musicians, dancers who are already at the top of their game. Professional athletes who, when you get to that level, the difference between good and great, like the difference for you guys was coming home or not, which is really, but when you're an athlete or an actor, the difference between good and great, it's all up here. And we can use these same exact techniques to get someone that's doing really well to the next level and beyond. And that's just as much fun as helping somebody that's down get up. So I'm so glad you mentioned that. And guys, it was just a blast. Let's do this again sometime. We just scratched the surface.
Definitely. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you for being on the show. And again, audience, you could check out Dr. John McGrail. Just Google him. A lot of great videos. Going to have him on the show again. Thank you very much. Take care.
You guys too. Take care.
All right.
Bye.